So today we're talking about symptoms. Do you maybe not feel right in your body? Are you having things happen in your life, ways that your life is going, things that you're able to do or not do that just aren't feeling right for how you thought things were going to be? So if you have any of these types of symptoms, too much sleep, too much eating, not enough eating, if you're having issues with drugs or alcohol, if you are finding you can't remember things as easily as you used to, or you can't find the words for things, you have trouble speaking up, if you can't find the motivation for things like you used to, if you can't remember what you used to want to do to make your life feel fulfilled, any of these types of symptoms, we're going to break them down today and understand why are our bodies doing this? What is it that is happening? And at the end, we're going to talk a little bit about what you can do about it. So this is based, today we're going to talk a little bit about another video I have, I'll link it below, but it's about what I call the survival house. And this is a way of understanding what our brains and our bodies are doing behind the scenes all the time, whether we're aware of it or not. So the really neat thing about our bodies and brains is that they are geared and programmed to keep us safe at all times. So the same way as you're sitting there right now and you're digesting your food and you're balancing your body's temperatures and your pH levels and your glucose levels and all of these things, you're not actively sitting there telling your body what to do. You're not saying, okay, body, I think we need, to turn down the heat a little bit, and all, your body's doing these things outside of your conscious control. Your body is constantly working to keep you alive. Now, the really cool thing is our bodies also do this with our emotions and our memories and our experiences. So our bodies take what has happened in our lives and they integrate it into our entire framework in our brains and our memories and in our nervous system. And it uses that information to then shift and change how we live each day in a way that keeps us more likely to be safe and alive from an evolutionary perspective. Now, this is really important because a lot of people might think, okay, how is not eating enough going to keep me alive evolutionarily? Like, that's dumb, right? Or, how is not sleeping enough going to keep me more likely to be alive? Obviously, this is not working well. I'm not doing well. My health is suffering. All these bad things are happening as a result. True. Remember, evolution, though, is based on short-term survival, right? If you got through something in an acute moment and it let you live longer, you were then more likely to procreate, more likely to pass on your genetic information. And then because of that, those things were more likely to get passed down. Evolution didn't necessarily care if you lived to be a healthy, happy 50-year-old. Evolution cares if you lived long enough to pass on your genetic material. And after that, it doesn't really care too much. So a lot of the things we see is a buildup of these survival techniques evolutionarily that unfortunately run out of steam at a certain point as we live longer and longer lives, as we sort of almost artificially extend our lives as humans with medicine and all sorts of things we've done, which is great. Don't get me wrong. We want to keep doing those things, but we have to understand what it is that we're doing so that we can go back and understand these evolutionary adjustments so that we can then heal ourselves in a way that we can still access a healthy, whole life without these sort of complicated symptoms. Okay, so let's look a little bit at what these symptoms are I'm talking about. What is it our bodies and brain are doing? So I talked about this in more depth in that video. I was talking about the survival house. I'm going to go through it briefly, just kind of touch on it here. If you want more info, definitely watch the whole video. But as sort of a quick summary, I'm going to just quickly pop in and share my screen here with you. So we're going to start with this guy here. So this is a quick map of our brain here. So the brain is sort of in these three layers, what's called this sort of neocortex. That's our most recent evolutionary sort of mammal advanced part of our brain where all of our sort of rational thinking, memory, language is. The limbic system is sort of inside, and underneath that, that's our sort of emotional or feeling brain. It's a little older evolutionarily, a bit more basic. And then underneath and behind that is what we call that sort of brainstem and cerebellum, often referred to as the reptile or instinctual brain. And so these three layers kind of match up, follow the color scheme as well here with this diagram here, which is around our nervous system, specifically the vagus nerve. That's the longest, biggest nerve in our body. Vagus means wanderer. So it's this wandering nerve throughout all of our body. The top part of our nervous system up through our face, our sort of 12 cranial nerves, is what's known as our ventral vagal complex. So this is from polyvagal theory. This is Stephen Porges' work. So ventral vagal complex is sort of, again, our most mammal social part of our brains and our bodies, where we smile when we're happy, we're sad, and that we communicate using our voice and our expressions. We hear things and what people are saying and noises people are making. So everything up in here is sort of that top most advanced part. Down a little bit further is the starting point of what's known as the sympathetic nervous system. That's what you may be familiar with as your fight or flight. That's your reactive adrenaline rushes, your heart rate goes faster, your breathing goes faster. Basically that sort of danger zone gets turned on, something's not right. And then down below that, sort of starting in that sort of lower part of your body, is what's known as the dorsal vagal complex. That is basically your shutdown system. That means if you're down in that part of your body, you're not feeling safe, you're shut down, and everything slows down through that part of your digestive system, down through there. So taking these two ideas together, it comes together in this piece here, and this is what I call the survival house. So the survival house is this metaphor that sort of links together these sort of three layers through brain and nervous system. The top layer is this sort of social safe zone. We have our couch there. That's for the fact that we can be intimate and close with each other in this space. We have the book stack on the side there, which is around the fact that this is where our memory is. This is where our logical thinking is. This is where our planning is. This is also language, because books are written in language up there. The trophies and medals on that side there are also around the fact that this is the floor we tend to value as humans and think that this sometimes is all that exists. Now below that we have, so now we're into that limbic system and that sympathetic part of our nervous system, remembering from these two diagrams here, follow the colors along, which then leads us to that fight or flight zone. So here we have these book stacks, and they are representative of a part of the brain called the amygdala. The amygdala is part of a brain that specifically stores what we kind of call trauma memories. If trauma feels a little bit big, just in general, think of it in terms of as not good memories that felt at some level that they were going to kill you. So evolutionarily, remembering that this can be any of sort of 5 major categories. This is abandonment and rejection, especially when we're younger. If our parents abandon us, we're probably going to die, right? We're little and helpless. If we're rejected, a little bit older, and especially in our teen years, this can feel like, again, we're going to die from an evolutionary perspective. If we get kicked out of our clan or our tribe of people, humans don't do well just on their own. So if you're not part of the group, you evolutionarily might die. It also covers feeling trapped or helpless in an unsafe way. If we're trapped and something not okay is happening, it blocks our ability to flight. We can't get out because we're trapped. And if we're helpless, it blocks our ability to fight. We can't fight back. So we end up often shutting down. And then the last one is just generally out of control in some way or another. So we have, every single one of us has stuff in these book stacks. Sometimes we have very big book stacks where we have lots of these trauma memories and bad things have happened to us. And sometimes we have small book stacks, and whatever it is, we tend to have then varying levels of intensity of responses that go with it. So then the bottom floor here is that shutdown response. So again, this is the lowest part of our nervous system and sort of the most basic part in our brain. And what happens there is, especially if we've come from that top floor to that middle floor, fight or flight, and nothing's working, we can't sort of solve whatever that issue is from that sort of adrenaline fueled space, that active space, we can end up going down into shutdown. And that's where evolutionary, we have learned to just be quiet, be still, wait it out. If we go way, way back, this is actually a spineless or a toothless fish in the ocean. You know, we're talking 500 million years ago. They would basically just burrow into the mud and wait if a predator was there, and whoever could outweight the other would live longer. So we have this waited out approach in our body that actually keeps us safe and alive if that second floor isn't working. If we're trying to fight or flight or other responses that are active responses and they're not working, shutdown is the next kind of last trick up our sleeve that our body does for us, which again, evolutionary perspective is great. Modern day society can sometimes cause us problems. So we end up with this sort of summary here, right? You can see the different parts of the brain on the right-hand side, and you've got the different parts of the nervous system, just so you can kind of see how they all blend together, and then the different parts that go with it. So understanding that we all have some levels of traumas that are with it. When we think then of what the symptoms are from being on these different floors, and the visceral experience of what it is and what it can do to our day-to-day life, is it can create, basically, if you look at what's called the DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual that lays out all the bullet points that a diagnosing physician or psychiatrist or psychologist would look at to kind of place or diagnose you in whatever category in terms of depression or anxiety or bipolar or what have you. They're looking at these certain criteria. And they often have to do with eating and sleeping and behaviors and thoughts and things that happen. And they actually line up exactly with what's going on in these systems. So when we think about, let's start with, for instance, sleep. A lot of us struggle with sleep. Sometimes we know why, and sometimes we don't. But if we think about the issue of sleep, if we're in this sort of second floor of fight or flight, that means something's triggering us, again, whether it's present day that we know it's happening, that there's a present, you know, the equivalent of a bear coming at us in the woods, or it's something from these sort of book stacks in terms of our history that our brain and our body is getting triggered from, that something feels familiar in our present moment to something from our past that wasn't okay. Then we're going to get this activation on this second floor. This alarm system is going to go up on the top floor. We're no longer going to get to be in that comfy couch, that safe space. We're going to have to come down, and then we're going to be in this space here. Now, if you think about it, if we're in a fight or flight and adrenaline's going, our body's telling us something's not right, something's not okay. We think there's a bear chasing us, whether it's a memory or an actual physical thing in present day. How good of an idea is it going to be to fall asleep? Not going to be a good idea evolutionarily to fall asleep if a bear is chasing you. So our bodies will not let us sleep, and we'll get insomnia, and our bodies will continue to struggle with relaxing because they're dealing with this feeling underneath that it is not safe to relax right now. We need to solve whatever this problem is on that second floor. Okay, now if you're having the opposite problem, if you're having the problem of sleeping too much, you can't get out of bed, you can't wake up in the mornings, you're sleeping 14 plus hours a day and still not feeling rested, what's probably happening is you're more in this bottom floor, this shut down part of the floor. So that's often when whatever this activated response is from the second floor doesn't feel like it's working. So this may be, one example could be you're in a home. Let's say there's domestic abuse or violence happening in the home. It's not a safe home, but you're at the same time trapped. For whatever reason, you can't leave, maybe financial reasons or other reasons that you're currently not able to get out of that space. Your body's going to frequently drop into a shutdown space. Now, it can be, again, an active physical threat like this, or it can also be an emotional threat. This could be children or teens in a home where the parents are constantly fighting or yelling at them or criticizing them, and they don't feel safe. But again, they're trapped. They're 12 years old or 14 years old, and they don't have any other choice than to live at home. In their minds, we know, of course, there's resources, but for them, trying to problem solve as a child, you don't feel like you have any other resources a lot of the time, and your body can go into shutdown, not being able to get out of bed, not wanting to leave the house, not wanting to do anything, not wanting to go out with friends. Sometimes these responses can be a result of the system, for whatever reason, gone down into shutdown. So remember, it can be real or perceived. Remember, trauma is subjective. We talk a lot about that in the first video. But trauma is subjective, and if our bodies and our brains believe something bad is happening, it's going to put these symptoms up to us. Whether an outsider from the outside looking in thinks it's valid or not, does not matter. If our bodies believe it's valid, it's going to put these symptoms out into our life. So sleep is a big one. Eating's another big one. So a lot of you may have heard again that fight or flight is this sort of second floor of the house. The top floor is actually what we often call rest and digest. So when we're social, this is a lot of times why we eat in groups. When we're sort of cueing with each other with smiling and laughter and jokes and we're comfortable, it's very easy to eat and to digest, and we feel comfortable doing so. Again, if you think about that metaphorical bear in the woods, coming out of the woods, and there's that moment of, I've got to get out of here, fight or flight, then, is that the time to sit down and eat your sandwich? No, right? Our bodies are going to give us that signal, stop eating, shut down the digestive system. It actually can create that butterfly feeling or nausea. In extreme cases, it can actually even create vomiting, which can sometimes even be a bottom floor response. And in general, it's going to be very hard to eat. We're not going to have much appetite. We're not going to want to eat if our bodies are like, woo, run, get away. So again, whether it's an active memory or something in these book stacks from our past that keeps getting triggered from our present day environment, something in our bodies tells us it's not time to eat. Now, interestingly, you're saying, okay, well, hey, I'm anxious all the time and I eat all the time. What's going on there then? Okay, well, one of the things that can happen is we can actually learn that there's a fun override to this system. If we get stuck in one of these floors and we don't like it and our body doesn't like it, we can create almost a false way to travel back up by eating. So sometimes we can almost force our bodies back up into rest and digest by starting to eat. If we're starting to feel a bit anxious, or if we're starting to feel a bit, not good, maybe our inner critic voice starts going, oh, hey, start eating. And the body starts to get these signals that, oh, no, we are safe. It's okay. But then what happens when we stop eating? Our body drops back into one of these floors, one of these bottom two floors, and we're not feeling okay again. Oh, what fixed it last time? Food. Okay, I got to eat again. Then I feel good again, right? So we keep trying to use food to travel back up into that top floor. And this is how sometimes those unhealthy eating or addictive eating patterns can start. So another way that we sometimes try to shortcut the system or sort of create, I almost imagine along the side here, is like a fire escape system along the side, where sometimes we can also, again, use drugs and alcohol to override some of these feelings, right? The classic, come home from work and have a beer, have a glass of wine, and your system, after a stressful day at work, pops out of that fight or flight and lets you come back up to that social relaxed state. Instead of using breathing exercises or meditation or one of those other approaches to help come back up, drugs and alcohol is a quick override. But what can happen, right, is, healthy, safe use of those things at times and in social situations versus our bodies learn, okay, we don't know how to get out of this floor other than by having a glass of wine. And as soon as that buzz wears off, I don't feel good again. Okay, need another glass of wine to get back up here, right? Our bodies are constantly wanting us to be in this top floor if we can. It feels good to be up there, to be social and connected and safe and happy. And if we're not up in one of those two floors, we're often seeking how to get there. And if we don't have other coping skills, or if we don't have other resources or ways to turn off these book stacks, we're sometimes going to fall prey to one more glass of wine, one more glass of wine, one more beer, one more whatever. Same thing with a weed or other drug uses, right? Especially your pain numbing oxys and those types of things create that artificial feeling of being on the top floor. And as soon as that drug high goes away, we're back feeling all of this stuff all over again, right? So long term, how do we break these addictions is we have to go back in here and work on what's been triggering the system. How do we keep ending back up, dropping from that top floor into this second fight or flight reaction, or all the way down into shutdown? And only once we do that can we usually really break these patterns of staying stuck in these artificial loops to get out of the feelings we don't want to be in. So those are some of the big ones. Of course, there's things like memory. A lot of people say, I seem to forget things all the time. I can't keep things straight. I miss appointments. Or, I can't think of the word that I'm trying to say. I'm going to be in the middle of a sentence and suddenly it's like my words disappear. There's, of course, the classic as a student. I've studied for, 2 weeks and I show up to the test and it's like I didn't study anything. It's all gone. What's happening is right back to this diagram here. All of the top floor stuff is language up here. This is the outside mammal advanced part of our brain. That's where language lives. That's where memory lives. If we don't have those things, each time we drop down a floor, whether we're fight or flight or whether we're shut down, the further we are, the harder it is to access. So if we're all the way into shutdown, and shutdown is, right, remember, this is a flat affect. This is, you're not using any of those cranial nerves that are up in that sort of top end here, right? So you're using all that lower gastric stuff is slowing everything down. It's very hard to find words. This is someone who may walk into a counseling appointment and you say, what brings you here today? And you get a big pause. Or you get I'm not really sure. And they speak very slowly and you don't see a lot. Versus someone who's coming into a counseling appointment on the second floor, you might get a lot right away. Like, well, I don't really know where to start. And I have this and I have that. And you're getting lots of language, but it's maybe not organized the way that you might get up here, right? Versus where you sit down with a friend and going through your day, you're going to get an organized, a lot of the times a story that makes sense. Our brains sort of disconnect, but can follow language sometimes when we're here, but sometimes we forget words or we forget major points when we're in that middle floor. And when we're down here, it can be very hard overall. So depending on how, far and how difficult it is to remember things can be an indication of how frequently we also are triggered into this floor or this floor. That might help understand what your body's doing as understanding through your symptoms. Things like motivation, life plan. What do you want to do in terms of a career? What makes you happy? What are your hobbies? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? Those types of things. If those pieces are challenging, again, this is a part of the brain along the outside. There's a book, The Body Keeps the Score, that looks specifically at brain scans in people who are re-experiencing trauma or a traumatized brain, that show it's right down the midline of the brain that these sections that code for identity, life plan, motivation, all of these types of things, the blood basically leaves those parts and it's back into that, your more basic parts of the brain we looked at here, down through here and up in your limbic system. And this is all patchy up in this outer part of your brain, especially along that midline. So if you're constantly living in that anxiety floor, or you're down here in that more depression floor, it can be very, very challenging to pick a career or, make a decision about what you want to do and who you want to be and what goals you have. So if you're finding you're struggling with those types of things, it can be an indication that, again, you might be struggling with some trauma triggers that you may or may not be aware of. And especially, one of the most difficult symptoms, to be frank, is that of suicidal thoughts, right? So what happens with suicidal thoughts, in fact, is this bottom floor is a shutdown floor. Remembering this is 500 million years ago, this system evolved pre-language. So when our bodies go into this shutdown response, remember, it's a burrow into the mud and hide and wait until it's over response. If our bodies are in this shutdown response, when we try to put words to this feeling, it can end up sounding over time like a feeling of, I should be dead. Should I be dead? Play dead, right? Shouldn't be alive anymore. Don't be alive, right? When we try to match language to this very old, ancient evolutionary response in our bodies, we can end up with the development of suicidal thoughts, of trying to escape, trying to not be here anymore, try to disappear. I am not important. No one cares if I'm here. All of those types of thoughts are this shutdown response. So in a way, they are not abnormal in the way that they actually make sense when we understand why our brain and body is doing it. So that, tends to fit more with that bottom floor, which is more the depression floor. We don't often see that as much with anxiety, because anxiety is more like, how do I solve this problem? What do I do? How do I fix it? And at most feeling mostly overwhelmed. Now, anxiety and depression do often go hand in hand. As you can see, when you're on the top floor, you can slip down to the anxiety floor and back up again, and you don't always have to hit depression. But if you're someone who is suffering with depression, you do actually have to travel back up the middle floor to get back up. So depression is usually what they call comorbid with anxiety. You tend to have to travel back up through anxiety to get to the top. So when you look at symptom wise, if you're shut down, if you can't get out of bed, if you can't, you don't want to leave your house, you don't want to do social things, you're finding it very hard to move at all or do anything at all, the very first thing is, instead of thinking about up here, all the schoolwork you have to do or all the career stuff you're supposed to get done at work, very first thing you actually want to do is start moving your body. This is the active floor in the middle. So first you need to get active. Now the trouble is, you're probably going to feel anxious before anything else. So you get active, anxiety will probably hit you. You have to be prepared for this. And then we're talking about strategies to come up and into that top floor. I'm going to make another video that's going to talk about strategies in terms of what are different counseling methodologies doing, what parts of this house are they tending to target, and then that can help you choose what approach is going to be most helpful for you, either to start with or to sort of continue with in wherever you are in your healing journey. Okay. A few more things in terms of symptoms we'll just touch on quickly here. Things like pain. Really good book called Childhood Disrupted that talks about what's known as ACEs. ACEs are adverse childhood experiences. Basically, it talks about what does accumulated trauma in our life, especially from a young age, do to our bodies in terms of our physical selves. And there's huge correlations between all sorts of things. The middle floor, remembering we're looking at, let's go to this guy here. So this nervous system starts in the center, but it actually travels through your whole body, is this sympathetic nervous system. So when we're constantly living from this middle floor, we are activated our whole nervous system all the time. So we actually can get pain, fibromyalgia, arthritis, other things that involve the entire nervous system, blood pressure, all those things that are sort of full body experiences. When we're looking more into sort of the shutdown, we're looking at that lower gut and body. This can be weight gain, weight issues, especially in that lower sort of gut area. Headaches can be a little bit both floors. Migraines tend to especially be shut down when you look at this brain section, right? When we talked about the trauma brain, the blood flow shifts into different parts of your brain. That changes pressure through your brain and your head, that can create the experience of migraines, auras, those different types of things you may feel. Of course, through this whole thing too, there's going to be a big connection with libido, sex drive, difficulties performing, difficulties orgasming are all going to be sort of through those bottom two floors. Again, think evolutionarily, if you got, again, the equivalent of the bear chasing you in the woods, you're not wanting to get down with your partner because it's not going to be safe to do so. That's why the couch is on that top floor. We need to be safe in how we feel with a partner in order to sort of do those things. So that's another symptom that can be connected a lot. That's most of the symptoms I had sort of written down. I just want to touch briefly on one. We're going to talk about different therapies and other things, but one of the neat ones in terms of, this, how do we get back up to the top floor, is remembering that it's using this top part of our eyes, ears, nose, mouth. So when you think of all of those sort of things you maybe take for granted that seem to help, they help most people. Music, right? Music goes in our ears. It activates this part of our nervous system and helps us actually bring us sometimes out of these bottom two floors. Chatting with a friend, right? Turning words, thoughts into words, being around someone who makes us laugh and smile helps us use this part and brings us up out of those floors. Animals, pets, they have similar, dogs, cats, horses, especially that have these same muscle groups because they're also social creatures, are able to actually lift us up out of these ways of feeling. Going for a walk, right? If we're shut down, feeling really shut down in general, or if we're feeling activated, we got to move, go for a walk. It starts to help loosen everything up in this part of our body, gets that part of our nervous system feeling happy again. And then we can pop back up into that top floor again. So, think of something in your own life. If there's something that you're like, I know this always helps me, check it out. Does it happen to fit in one of these floors, one of these ways of helping lift you out using this top end of your nervous system? So that's mostly what I wanted to talk about too. Today, all of those symptoms, right? You think everything from muscle tenseness in that second floor versus shut down in that bottom floor, feeling weak, feeling tired all the time. All of these different things all fit in. There's very few that are outside of this. And if they are, again, there's usually other integrations that make sense. If you have any questions, obviously feel free to pop them down in the comments below. I'm going to link a few other things too, just a reminder. There's my books that you can have if you like sort of the stuff I talk about. There's my first book is called How to Like Yourself. My second one is the Resilience Workbook for Teens. It's for anyone. It's a real resilience strategies are for any age, but it is accessible, of course, for teens. My newest one is Real Talk About Sex and Consent. And that's, again, geared towards teens and anyone, because it's probably something most of us have to learn or relearn once we understand all this information. The Survival House is in this book. We talk about it and how it relates to consent. I do have an online course on consent. I'll link everything below, as well as if you like the Survival House stuff, you can order prints as well below here. And if you want to follow along with more about the Survival House, make sure to hit that subscribe button as well. So thanks for following along, and definitely pick up copies of the books. I'll link them below. And if you want to know more, ask questions, follow me on social media, Cheryl M. Bradshaw, or author Cheryl M. Bradshaw on Facebook. And thanks for tuning in.